Good afternoon, God Firsters. Hope that you guys are well. As we've been in this lockdown period, the reality of the economic challenge that lies ahead has become more and more real. I've begun to meditate on how incredibly generous God is to us. And yet at the same time, I'm keenly aware that your situation has probably changed significantly. For many of you, you might be concerned that your income source may have dried up or been significantly reduced. Your savings may have been depleted, and you may be looking at a future that's uncertain in terms of resource. On the other hand, I'm also sure that your expense profile has changed over these last few weeks. I'm sure you've spent a lot less money than you would normally spend on things like transport and entertainment. I'm sure you've spent a lot more money on things like data and food around the house. I know that I've visited the fridge a lot more than I would normally do. And so in light of that, I wanted to just take a moment to think about these things in the light of the fact that God is so generous to us. I want to give you some tips on how to think about your personal finances, how to take some steps to plan for the future. But before doing that, I want to read you a passage of Scripture to remind us to combat the fear of not having. I want to remind us that actually God has promised to provide for our needs. In Luke 12, from verse 28 to 31, we read the following: "But if God so clothes the grass, which is alive in the field today and tomorrow is thrown into the oven, how much more will He clothe you, O you of little faith? And do not seek what you are to eat and what you are to drink, nor be worried. For all the nations of the world seek after these things, and your Father knows that you need them." He knows. "Instead, seek His kingdom, and these things will be added to you." So I guess I want to remind you that God is for you, God is with you, you are His child, and He will provide for you. But let me move on to a couple of tips for how we can be thinking at this time. The first thing I want to remind us of is that we are stewards of resources that He has entrusted to us. And basically, stewardship is really facing the reality that everything we possess, money, possessions, everything we possess, even if we earned it through our own hard work, comes from and belongs to God. In Deuteronomy 8, verse 18, we read the following: "You shall remember the Lord your God, for it is He who gives you power to get wealth." So in many ways, friends, that means our job remains the same. It's managing resources that have been entrusted to us. Now, there might be fewer of them, but the job for us to manage them well remains. The second tip I want to give to us is that we would not let fear hinder generosity. That we would be a generous people, not overwhelmed by fear. Now, there are many people in a far worse position than you are at this time. And we have a human disposition to compare ourselves to those who have more. And I want to call us to being disciplined in thinking more about those who have greater needs than ourselves, that we would have a correct perspective of where we find ourselves. I want to suggest that we might want to consider making some of the cash that we are not spending. I mentioned some areas where we're not spending money to support in some of the relief efforts going on. There's the Solidarity Fund the government is running. In our church, we have set up a relief fund to take care of people within our community, known to us, who are needing help because their income sources have dried up and they have no money for food. On top of that, we have partners in Cherished who are caring for women in the sex industry whose work has also dried up at this time. And they are caring for close to 100 women and their children. And we've been able to partner with them in channeling resource to that great need as well. And so we've got a promise in Proverbs 11, verse 24 to 25, about being generous. It says, "One person gives freely, yet gains even more. Another withholds unduly but comes to poverty. A generous person will prosper, and whoever refreshes others will be refreshed. Let's be those that are refreshing others at this time. Let's not give in to fear, but let's be in faith, trust God, and live generously. Third tip for us. I want to call us to planning some budget adjustments. So don't wait for 3 months of much lower than expected income before you start making adjustments to your budget, but begin planning now for how an adjustment like that might affect you. You might want to assess, given the work that you do, what your income might reduce by. 15%, 30%, might even be 50%. Whatever it might be, why don't you go back to your budget and begin stripping out things that you can get by without, so that you can begin to have a plan should your income drop by 15%. You know where you're going, what you're going to cut. Equally, if it's 30%, you know what further cuts that you need to make. It might be a time where you need to think about some alternative income generating options. And you might want to turn to God and ask Him and say, God, please give me the creativity to think of some alternative sources of income. You might want to ask God for creativity to be a blessing to your employer, to come up with ideas for revenue generation once you are able to go back to work. The Bible encourages us to plan. Proverbs 21 verse 5, the plans of the diligent lead to profit as surely as haste leads to poverty. Let's not neglect planning for what might lie ahead. So take some time, application, to go to work on your budget. And my fourth tip is around giving. Can I encourage us to continue to be faithful in our giving to the church? It might be that with your income situation changing, you're not able to give as much, but continue to give proportionately. Let us continue to honor God with what He's given us. Just to reassure you, as a leadership team, we've begun the process of reassessing our budgets and seeing where we can cut and reduce costs so that we can live within the new reality. Although there are many who will be able to continue giving at the same level, we are aware that there are many who have their own businesses and the like who will be significantly impacted through this pandemic. So just so you know, we are looking to be as responsible as possible whilst remaining on the front foot of mission, whilst continuing to seek to achieve the medium-term goals that we feel God's given us of know, grow and sow. We really do want to see people coming to know us through our love and service of them. We really do want to seek to grow both in maturity but also in people coming to know and love Jesus. And finally, we still want to see 3 congregations planted in the next 5 years. All of these initiatives will require finance, and so let's continue to be on the front foot there. At the same time, we're not wanting to neglect our giving commitments. And so it's important for us that we're still able to give. And just to remind you of our giving commitments, it is largely split between the poor and the expansion of the kingdom through church planting and strengthening. And so let's continue to be faithful. In Proverbs we read, honor the Lord with your wealth, with the first fruits of all your crops, then your barns will be filled to overflowing and your vats brim over with new wine. Let's go to God in prayer with verses like this. You know, Paul also encourages the Corinthians to excel in the grace of giving. And so friends, let's decide to continue to be worshipful in the way that we deal with our money. I look forward to many testimonies of God's great provision in these coming weeks and months. I so look forward to seeing you all. Hope you have a wonderful week. God bless. Lots of love. Cheers.